Hello everyone, Pantoufleee here today for a new video in which we're going to talk about my favorite Tech Tree Tier 10 tank per class. I decided to do this video simply because you guys asked for it, so here we go. We start with the medium one, the Progetto 65, and I'm going to tell you why I literally love this tank. There are multiple things that makes this tank quite interesting in my opinion. The first one is the gun, and especially the auto reloading mechanism. For the moment, because the Wagon is not out in the game yet, this tank is the only one having the auto reloader at tier 10. And the cool thing about that is that it's the perfect combination between an auto reloader tank and a regular one, simply because I think you all know that by now. You could either burst all your shells and wait for your whole reload, or you could also shoot only one shell, wait for it to be reloaded and shoot it again. It all depends on you. And because it depends on you, you can adopt the playstyle you want, and therefore it's not a one-sided tank in terms of playstyle. You can either burst everything and play it like a regular auto-loader or play it like a regular medium. And if you combine that with the fact that the tank has a really good turret, a really good gun depression, a really good mobility, it makes it, at least to me, my favorite medium tank at tier 10. There are also a lot of things that makes this tank interesting. Most of the time the gun depression. I love playing this tank on ridge lines where you can just poke around, you have the gun dispersion for it, it should work fine. Also I like to run it with calibrated shell to be sure not to bounce anything. And you're gonna see, especially against the E100 here, that we're literally gonna destroy his ass, unfortunately for him. Sorry fella if you're watching that video, you were really unlucky on the end, and you're gonna see why, guys. What I like also about the turret is the magic bounces you're gonna take. I mean, the Progetto 65, we all know it has a trollish armor, simply because the upper part of the tank, if it's angled correctly, is literally impossible to penetrate. It's gonna lead to some amazing bounces that are quite fun to experience. But also the turret armor. The turret is quite round, even if it's paper. But still, people will bounce on it. I literally don't know why we have this kind of problems and how it's possible that we bounce this turret, but it happens, and it happens a lot. I mean, it's not something on this tank that you will see one or two times if you play it all day. No, it happens really regularly, probably one match out of 3, and God bless the RNG because it's helping quite a lot. You're gonna see what I'm talking about right now. For example, the bounce of the mouse of the E100, sorry, on my turret right now. It's something that I don't really understand with the tank, but that makes it really fun. So if you combine the trollish armor with a good mobility and an auto reloading mechanism allowing you to adapt the playstyle of your choice and therefore never being bored of a certain playstyle because you can change, this tank is definitely my go-to one if you want to have some fun at tier 10 in medium. Now, the light tank, I think there is nothing surprising here, it's the Sheridan. And not necessarily because of ATGMs. Of course, ATGMs helps a lot because it's the only tank with the T92E1 in this game equipped with it, and therefore sometimes if you're on a ridge line you don't need to show your tank to be able to hit, which will allow you not to take worthless shots where some mediums or light tanks will have to take shots in order to shoot back. But with this one, what I love is the alpha damage. The alpha damage is incredible, because 560 alpha damage with a tank like that, it really allows you, especially in the end game, to finish off targets. And the really cool factor about this alpha damage is that most of the time when you're in the end game, you will not encounter a full life HP tank. It happens, but it's quite rare. Most of the time, if you're in a 1 versus 3 situation and it's at the end of the game, they will probably have less than 1000 hit points. Therefore, there are 2 shots for you, and they can even have less than 500, and therefore they become 1 shots. And the cool thing about that is that if you manage to run away correctly on the map using your mobility, using your ATGMs, etc., you can actually win easily some Kolobanov's medal through the runaway and shoot ATGM tactic. I know it's a little bit of a coward tactic, but if it works, who cares? Also, what makes me really like the Sheridan is that this tank really has a huge impact on the battlefield because of its alpha damage. For example here, take a look at the grill we just shot. We did around more than 600, I think it was 612 or 672, I didn't really catch up the numbers, but I did more than 600 damage. For a light tank, you have the alpha damage of a tank destroyer. And I can guarantee you that having a huge alpha damage like the one you have on the Sheridan will scare your enemy. Therefore, you can hold flanks with this tank better than if you had a Vickers Light or a Batchat 25 tons. I'm not saying that this tank is a brawler, I mean, you can't hold a flank as much as a mouse would be able to. But you can scare your enemies, and if you do your job correctly, you will inflict severe damage, which will lead you to the victory. Of course, you gotta keep in mind that you have a huge reload for a light tank, therefore being alone is not the best thing to do. Here that's my case, I was alone on both of these tanks, but I managed to do it, to do my job correctly at least. You're gonna see that I have some RNG luck right there because I was totally brained like a bot, but the STB decided not to push me. God bless this guy for not pushing. But yeah, with the Sheridan, what I like is that even if you have the traditional light tank role, you are more than just a light tank, because you are scary to your opponents, and if you're in the end game, you're gonna be more useful than if you was a Vickers Light, for example, because of your alpha damage. If you combine that with the fact that you can switch from light mode to artillery mode, it becomes a must-have in your garage and a really fun tank to drive around. Of course, do not abuse too much ATGMs, guys, because let's face it, this mechanism is breaking the game. Even if now I think ATGMs starts to be balanced because people tend to play them less and we see less and less Sheridans on the battlefield, which is a good thing, to be fair, because I remember the good old days when they were released and we had ATGMs running all over the place. That was a nightmare. But yeah, Sheridan, definitely a tank to go for, and my favorite light tank. Now, the heavy class, it's definitely the IS-4. I think you all know that because I talked about the tank a lot in stream. And what I love about this tank, for those of you who know my playstyle, I like to play aggressively. If I don't play aggressively, I tend to get bored of the game. And the IS-4 really allows you to play aggressively. You have a really good mobility if we compare it with your huge weight and armor. So it's really cool to have that much armor with a really good mobility. You also have a really good gun that has good alpha damage. I'm not gonna say it's broken, it's just good alpha damage, and of course a really amazing armor. And that's what makes me love the IS-4, because with this one you can literally push through, you can face hug whatever tank in front of you, and if you face hug the tank, you should be set up to bounce every shots he will try to penetrate. That's what I love about the IS-4. Also, the fact that you can over-angle your tank, especially on the side, by the side scraping method, as you see here on the IS-7. I tried it and he bounces. That is great. With this tank, you can bounce a lot just by angling. As long as you know how angling works, you should be a god among regular players while driving this tank on the battlefield. To me, the IS-4 is the tank you take when you want to say, okay, fuck it, I want to win without really thinking too much about what I'm doing. Just look at this game, for example. What did I do? I pushed literally the IS-7 after I pushed the VK7 to 1K. You're gonna see in the future of the replay in like 10 or 20 seconds. But yeah, that's what I like. It's a brawler. You go straight in, and unlike a mouse or a Ni-100, for example, even if people shoot at you with gold shells, it's not guaranteed that they will penetrate. That's something that is really important while playing this tank. It's not a super heavy, because it's not as big as a super heavy, but its playstyle is quite similar to one, and it even has a better armor in my opinion than these tanks. If you manage to hide your lower plate, you should be able to bounce. That's pretty much how it is. Of course, if you're encountering a tank destroyer that is using gold shells, he will probably go through your upper plate quite easily. But when you're facing lights, when you're facing mediums, when you're facing some heavy tanks at tier 10 that have low penetration, they will not go through it. And that's what is lovely about the Ice 4, and that's why, to me, out of the Tech 3 tanks, it's the best to drive around. That's pretty much it for the Ice 4. You combine armor, mobility, gun, you have a really good tank and a really fun one to drive around. Finally, my favorite tank destroyer is the latest one being implemented, the Ori Samurai. I literally felt in love with this tank because it combines everything I need to have fun. It has a really good mobility for a tank destroyer. You have a top speed that is great. It will allow you to take aggressive positions. You combine that with a really good turn rate, which allows you to be flexible and not being circled too easily. But the main factor, the gun. I love the high penetration of the Ori. When you switch to gold shells with this tank, you will penetrate everything, upper plate of the mouse included. You have more than 400 millimeters of penetration, and that's where the fun factor hits. Of course, I could have taken, for example, the Object 268, saying, yeah, that's my favorite tank because it combines everything, blah blah blah. No, I literally love the Ori because of the 400 and plus millimeters of penetration. Also, the armor is really trollish. You have a huge gun mantlet. Of course, you have turret cheeks like pretty much every single tanks in this game except some. But with this huge gun mantlet, if you manage to wiggle, you're gonna bounce. And you can have amazing bounces with the Ori. To me, the armor is close to the one you have on the Progetto 65 in terms of trolling, because the armor is extremely trollish on this one as well. There are some flat parts that are easy to penetrate, for example the lower part of the hull, the middle part of the hull, and also the turret cheeks. But if you wiggle and angle it properly, you can actually increase that armor in order for you to get penetrated only by tanks using gold shells. Unlike the Ice 4, even with gold shells, on the Ice 4, even with gold shells, people can bounce you. On the Ori, it's not going to be the case. But if you manage to make them shoot at your gun mantlet, which is impenetrable, you're going to have some fun. And the Ori, it's really the perfect combination for me between armor, mobility, and gun. And for the gun, oh boy, do I like this gun. You don't have the best alpha damage out there. Okay, I can understand that. But you have 10 seconds of reload. You reload faster than most tier 10 heavy with huge alpha damage. Unlike a 268, which will be able to maybe shoot one time on tank before this tank in front will reload, with the Ori it's not the same. You can shoot twice, and if you can shoot twice, it means 1000 damage instead of only 640. That's what I love about this tank. It will not bounce anything. We could also talk about the nature of its premium shells. As you have AP, you are not bothered like some tanks. For example, the 268 I think has heat shells when it comes to gold shell. The problem with heat shells is that these will not penetrate through spaced armor. With the Ori, you don't care. As soon as you go for your AP plus, which is your gold shell, you will go through whatever. Spaced armor, it penetrates. Tracks, it penetrates. Huge upper plate, it penetrates. It penetrates everything. For this tank, every single tier 10 tank is a flashlight penetrated quite easily. And that's what is lovely about this tank, and that's probably why it's my favorite tank destroyer. Of course, when you're playing with this one, you need to have skill. It's definitely not a tank made for new players, and the fact that you need skill to play it correctly is something great, because it's really rewarding when you're doing great with this tank, knowing you have to get skill in order to do good. It's not like an Ice 4 where you can just roll and your armor is already angled, so it's gonna do the job. Here, it's not the case. So that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed. I gave you my opinion about all these tanks we saw previously. That's pretty much the tanks I love to play when I'm driving around at tier 10, at least for the tech tree, because of course when it comes to collectible, I change my mind in terms of the best tank to play around. But hey, that's how it is. Collectibles will always be better than regular tech tree tanks, simply because Wargaming needs money, and the best way for them to sell these tanks is to make them broken. See you soon, guys.